Welcome to Magical Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Letson, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Kaldheim is just around the corner, and that makes this a great time to talk about one of the creature types at home within its 10 realms, trolls. They've been a part of Magic since the game's very first set, and they have gone through some interesting changes over the years. So while we're waiting for the full story of Kaldheim to unravel, let's take a look at a history of trolls. A quick reminder that this show is made possible by our patrons, so if you like hearing the stories behind the cards, consider becoming a lore mage yourself using the link down below. Okay, so after spending an unhealthy amount of the new year watching Trolls World Tour with my 5-year-old daughter, my brain set to work, without my permission, trying to learn everything it could about this unusual creature type. It all starts in Magic's very first set release, which contained 2 trolls. At Uncommon, there was Uthden Troll, a 3-mana 2/2 with the ability to regenerate itself for a single red mana. Now, if you're new to the game, a 3-mana 2/2 might seem kind of weak, but back in the day, this guy was pretty much on rate. And then there's the regenerate ability, which we all know trolls have that. I mean, surely it comes from like an old Norse story or folktale or something we've all heard, yeah? Well, it turns out, no. The earliest reference we can find to a regenerating troll is a book published in 1961 called 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. In this book, a World War II resistance fighter is wounded in battle and gets sent into a parallel dimension where many elements of classic European fantasy are real. He even encounters a troll who proves to be a very tough enemy as it is able to regenerate quickly from its wounds. It is believed that this troll went on to influence the ones found in early Dungeons and Dragons, and that's why we all assume trolls can regenerate, an idea that has spread to many other games, including my beloved Heroes of Might and Magic. Except the trolls are part of the barbarians, and I think they're one of the worst armies in the game, so I tend to avoid them. Anyway, the first 2 trolls in Magic could regenerate themselves because that's what D&D trolls did, and not because it happened in any sort of Norse story. And that second troll, by the way, was Sedge Troll, another 2/2 for 3 mana, but this one was rare, so he got some extra text. Namely, he would get +1/+1 if you controlled at least 1 swamp, but his regenerate ability needed black mana, so why wouldn't you? Now, regeneration in Magic is a tricky one. It's an ability that does not show up often on cards anymore, partly because it's confusing for new players, but also because it's just not a fun mechanic to play against. Basically, the way it works is you have to activate the regenerate ability before the creature would die. This creates a sort of regeneration bubble around the creature that will last until the end of the current turn. If the creature would die while it has this bubble, instead the bubble pops and the creature is tapped and removed from combat. To be clear, regeneration does not return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. If they're already dead, it's too late to regenerate them. You have to think of it in terms of Wolverine and not Jesus. Okay? So, a regenerating creature can be very hard to kill. You can try to pick it off before combat, so it's at least tapped and can't block, but otherwise, they are really annoying to try to get past. And yet, despite how inelegant this mechanic was, it would appear on virtually every troll for the next 20 years, mostly because it was such a good flavor fit. Even though we just established that flavor came from one book published 30 years before Magic existed. Just saying. So the first 2 trolls were red, but I bet you'll never guess what color troll number 3 was. It was blue! Oh, early Magic, man. It was really something. Sea Troll was uncommon, but was worse than his red cousins in several ways. He had less toughness, and his regenerate ability could only be used if he blocked or was blocked by another blue creature. The trolls were not off to a great start, but lucky for them, even in the early days of Magic, there was a surefire way to make a creature good. Add green! Jungle Troll from Mirage. Well, okay, he's not exactly better than anything we've seen so far, but he is the first multicolored troll, and he does take that all-important first step into green, which will become the home for the trolls for the next several years. We'd get 4 mono green trolls between Tempest and Masks, and they're all pretty similar in design, a little on the small side for their price, but they can each regenerate for just 1 or 2 mana. Invasion gave us our second multicolored troll, using white mana to add vigilance to the classic regen ability. These guys fought on the side of the Coalition against the Phyrexians during the invasion of Dominaria. Then, trolls made the jump into the modern card frame with their appearance in Mirrodin. Here, the tribe picked up its second rare with Troll Ascetic. His hexproof ability makes him nearly impossible to kill outside of combat, and we already covered how his regenerate ability makes him nearly impossible to kill during combat. So this guy could be a real speed bump for your opponent as long as you keep some mana open. Next came our first visit to Ravnica, where the trolls got to interact with a couple of guilds. Golgari Grave Troll carried the Swarm's watermark, but only needed one of its colors. Still, this card was good enough to eventually be banned in Modern, which is impressive for being the tribe's third rare. Sporeback Troll, meanwhile, found himself part of Simic experimentation and learned how to share his regenerative properties with anyone else carrying a +1/+1 counter. We'll return to Ravnica in a bit, but first we've got to survive Planar Chaos, which gave us a color-shifted version of the first troll in the game. That's right, our old friend Sedge Troll is back, this time in green as the cleverly named Hedge Troll. He needs plains rather than swamps, and he's only an uncommon rather than a rare, but this was still a fun throwback to the early days of Magic. Eventide was a big leap forward in troll design. We got our first hybrid mana trolls, and the first one to not have the word regenerate printed on it at all. Rendclaw Tro instead used the persist mechanic to represent a difficult to kill troll. But don't worry, we're not ready to ditch regenerating completely just yet. Now, I don't usually talk about legendary creatures during historical reviews because I try to save those for lore rankings, but as there are so few trolls, I might as well address the last one. By which I mean Thrun, the last troll. He was the only one of his kind to avoid the Vanishing, which removed all of the other trolls from the plane of Mirrodin. As the last of his kind, he is an excellent representation of everything we've come to expect from trolls so far. He can't be countered, he can't be the target of spells or abilities, and he cannot be easily killed thanks to his fairly priced regeneration ability. All of that makes him worthy of being the tribe's first mythic rare and first legendary creature. From that iconic mono-green legend, we head back to Ravnica, where this time all of the trolls are key rune-carrying members of the Golgari Swarm. They can each regenerate, but Lotlith Troll is the first of his tribe to also have Trample, and with a built-in way to accumulate +1/+1 counters, he could grow into a threat that was both powerful and difficult to remove as the game went on. Now, we've seen trolls fight for noble causes or fight for their guild, but most of the time they're just kind of indifferent to whatever's happening on the plane, and that's the case on Zendikar. Harvester Troll is the second of his kin to forego classic regeneration, and the flavor text tells us he didn't really pick a side during the Eldrazi invasion of his home. Gee, I wonder if he's still alive. From here on out, the switch has been flipped. Trolls will no longer carry the regenerate ability. Instead, they'll find other ways to show how durable they are, and we get to see that starting with our third visit to Ravnica. Both Golgari and Simic had their trolls on display this time around. Both had the ability to gain +1/+1 counters and eventually trample over lesser creatures. War of the Spark followed that up with Challenger Troll, and while his card may be forgettable, look at that art. He ripped an Eternal in half. He popped that thing's spine like I pop bottles in my G6. Anyway, Barkhide Troll M20, the first core set non-regenerating troll. This is important because Magic uses these releases to set expectations for how certain creatures behave within the game. They've said before that they've started modeling skeletons after the ones players are familiar with from Minecraft, for example. So, Mr. Barkhide here serves as our introduction to trolls in this game. Notice we've pretty much flipped the old 3-mana 2/2 on its head with a 3/3 for just 2 green. He can also potentially cheat death at least once by cashing in his +1/+1 counter. Honestly, this little dude was probably one of my favorite troll designs, and I hope to see him reprinted, maybe in another core set someday. Commander 2019 gave us our third legendary troll with Grismold the Dreadsower. We don't know what plane he's on, we only know that he feeds corpses to some carnivorous plants he found, and they reward him with their nectar, which is unusually nutritious. Finally, we reach Eldraine, where the trolls are some of the biggest and scariest we have ever seen, and that feels appropriate, coming from one of the most overpowered sets of all time. Clackbridge Troll is a self-contained reference to the classic fairy tale Three Billy Goats Gruff, in which 3 small goats make a hungry troll homeless. I mean, it's true, that's what happens. In Standard right now, this troll is played alongside Massacre Worm, which turns those goat tokens into 6 points of damage for your opponent. But they're probably playing rogues, and they're gonna win anyway, so they don't care. Feasting Troll King makes great use of Eldraine's food tokens to create a recurring threat. While he can't regenerate himself the way his ancestors could, he can eat his way out of the grave. And the way this pandemic is still going, that's a skill most of us should probably practice. And on Zendikar, trolls have become completely vanilla, so there's that. A few trolls have been previewed for Kaldheim, and you might be asking, Ryan, why do this video before the set comes out? Why not wait until you know all of the new trolls? Because, my friends, we must skate to where the puck is headed. That's why. Haggy Mob is a boastful bunch of trolls able to ping any target after they attack, and they mark the tribe's return to red for the first time in over 20 years. The real one to watch, though, is Old Growth Troll, who carries the regeneration torch by being able to return as a token after taking a brief dirt nap. His oversized stats put him closer to the weight class of his siblings from Eldraine than the ones from Dominaria, and the world-building guide for Kaldheim suggests the trolls here can grow to be simply massive, so I am excited to see what else they have in store for us. Could the trolls hold their own against the giants, demons, and Valkyries already seen from the other realms? We should know soon enough. So, trolls in Magic have had quite the journey. They started out as small, difficult-to-remove creatures in red and blue, and grew in size as they switched to green and black. Their mechanical identity was strongly tied to regeneration, which didn't come from Norse mythology so much as it was copy-pasted from Dungeons and Dragons, who in turn lifted the idea from a single fantasy book published 3 decades before the first Magic cards. At present, trolls are a respectable part of Standard, mostly thanks to their appearance in Eldraine, although they have traded in much of their regeneration for a larger stat line. Looking forward, the tribe could pick up another legendary leader on Kaldheim. At the very least, they will expand their ranks thanks to having a realm to call their own. I mean, what do you think? Will 2021 be the year of the trolls? Will the most metal Magic set of all time have us rocking out under a bridge? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya!